I've decided to do a series of spiritual videos because that's even more important than politics, and for reasons that you may not have expected. This one is about the biggest issue, I believe, affecting all Christians today, and it's the book of Revelation. A lot of people don't know the history of the book of Revelations. For example, um, good friends that I know that were very religious thought the whole Bible was put together before all the disciples had died, when in fact none of the books were even written until long after Jesus was dead, except for Mark was written 60 years after Jesus died. Um, so, but here's the history of the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation it was claimed to be a fraud at first. It was likely written by a specific occult extremist that was well known at the time. You can find this stuff on Wikipedia. Not that Wikipedia is the best thing to go by, but this is true. It was the last to be added by far, and was not part of the original canon because so many highly educated men, theologists, very spiritual men, that were filled with Holy Spirit had pointed to obvious evidence that it was a fraud. The author of Revelation called himself John, but didn't specify anything else. But his style of writing was proven to be nothing like that of the other author known as John in the books of John, even though that wasn't an apostle that wrote the other books, but that's besides the point. It was written hundreds of years after. Anyway, although, okay, ultimately, sorry, I'm reading a split screen. This article I wrote, I'm not doing it word for word, but I'm using it as a notepad. But anyway, ultimately, after the church had been infiltrated by the darkness, it was added despite many years of heated debates. Any book with that many educated and spiritually filled men insisting that this book is a fraud and not from God should not have been added, period. So why was it added? So other than darkness taking over the church, why else would it be added? Other than to keep us spiritually handicapped. And keep in mind, it was added about the same time that the church started committing mass murders by the hundreds of thousands over the next thousands of years, not thousands, hundreds of years, whatever, in the name of God. That was about the time it was added. So, moving on to the next part. When a person finally lets go of their original ideas about what God is, the church, and the Bible, they're likely to realize some shocking things about it all, and you wonder why they never noticed these things, and that should have been obvious. There's been so many things that I've been discovering since I opened my mind to this that are so obvious, but we just don't see it. And there's a reason behind that. I'll get back to it in a minute. And it's not because we're dumb. We'll get into that in a minute. The Bible itself has actually put a spell on us. It sounds insane, but once you have opened your mind to just the possibility of even the Holy Spirit itself will likely guide you to notice some of those obvious things that you couldn't notice before. Both the Old Testament and the New Testaments have been used by the dark side to prevent our spiritual growth. And I'll go into the Old Testament in my next video. That's important too. But not as important as this, because this is destroying our lives currently, because we see it as what's going on right now, and it's not. It's not what's going on right now. We have wasted hundreds of years waiting for revelations to happen, saying, oh, it's now, it's now, it's now, it's now. Okay, no, it's not now, and it never will be. It was put there to mislead us on purpose by darkness, period. And there's logic to this, and there's evidence to this. And here's some spiritual logic to add to the evidence for the next part of the article. The purpose of the prophets. Think about this. The God, God the Father, is the God of the living, for one thing. But keep that in mind. The prophets that were leading up to Jesus were to prepare the Jews for his coming. His purpose was to liberate them from the old Jewish laws. All 613 of them. We'll go into that some other time. He was to bring hope, because God is love. When Jesus was here, he taught about using logic and reason, love, forgiveness. Things that were actually good advice and guidelines, wisdom. The only real commandment he had to replace the Jewish laws was to truly love one another, which implies forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. That's love. He also advised that we should live in the now, and living in past or future isn't really living, or it's just not real. Also very good advice. What's also important to note is what he didn't say. Other than a few places in the Bible that actually seem out of place when you read them, he didn't say anything about the future doom and gloom end of the world. He talked about God's kingdom. He talked about coming back, and that things would get worse before that happened, but he did not mention the end of the world. He talked about him coming back, and God's kingdom was in the now, then and now, already happening, already here. His advice wasn't to be good now so you can go to a paradise later. He didn't teach us to look forward to a heaven or to fear hell. Although he did, say this is, forever, but it wasn't to live your life to be good so you can go to heaven and not hell. Nothing about that. Nothing about experiencing the wrath of God in Armageddon, whatever. He didn't talk about that. He talked about forgiveness for everyone. He came to defeat death and hell, and he came to save the world, not just a few. We'll talk about that in another later video too. Think about it. The earliest Christian gatherings were nothing like the modern day church. A lot of people don't know this until they read certain books, like, not just taking your church's word for it, but actually reading them. I think Acts, Romans, those type of books, the books that occurred in the storyline after Jesus' death and resurrection. It goes into detail about how these gatherings were done. It wasn't like our church at all. If you read the New Testament and the parts after Jesus' death, you'll read that it describes their gatherings. They were about spiritual growth, being guided by others, that each person got their own truths that were given to them from the Holy Spirit to them. Each person. Everyone participated in this. And I wasn't going to add this, but I'm going to. It was important for them, and the only really ritual they had was eating together. That was their commune. That was their communion, That was their communion. Their communion was eating together before their spiritual services or gatherings, where they had different activities. That was their way of doing what Jesus said. Do this in remembrance of me. Eat and remember me for life. It's not anyway. The early Christians didn't have a Bible. They had several texts that they read, not an official canon. More importantly, those texts weren't the main focus. They read letters from the apostles that were still also learning from the Holy Spirit themselves. They weren't considered something, the Bible. No, nothing like that. The Bible has many truths in it, but that is part of its unhealthy grip on us. We are to actively seek God that is true. And yes, Jesus' words are spirit. And yes, reciting religious texts can cause miracles to happen. I've seen it happen. But obsessing on the Bible has narrowed our view. It goes against its own teachings that we should test all things, which is true. We should test all things. Jesus spoke we should use our logic and sense of reason. It was a gift from God. We should use it. And worst of all, it has stolen how we would normally live. It has stolen living itself, limiting us, enslaving us, keeping us from growing closer to God than we are. The Bible is not God, like people are treating it. And it is ironically preventing us from growing past a certain point of spirituality, sharing limited truth mixed with some things that were put there to steal away our lives. That's my cat over there if you hear her. The church of the early Christians were just gatherings where everyone was equally a participant, not a priest or preacher or ruler talking down at everybody from a podium. Everyone participated. They ate together. They discussed things that they had learned from the Holy Spirit. Their main focus was learning from the Holy Spirit, just like Jesus promised they would. He said you would get the help from the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, after he left, so we could learn more from what's not in the text, that can't be learned in the text, that couldn't be put into words. And so people would get together and discuss these things. They would also speak in tongues. They would prophesy. They would interpret tongues, all kinds of things. It was Holy Spirit based, and everybody participated. Nothing like the church we have today. The church we have today is sickening when you know how they used to do it. If we did it this way, Anyway, moving on. Very differently since the modern day church took over. Yeah, okay. The church has been obsessed with the Bible and insisting it's flawless, which, I'm sorry, but no, you cannot have those right now. They insist that it's flawless because it was inspired by God. Well, okay, it's like, yes, true and not true. No, it's not flawless. Okay, all the Gospels are different. Some of them contradict each other. That is impossible. That is impossible for them all to be true. That cannot be. Logic. You're making people that say this need to think about this. The world is looking at you like you're an idiot. That makes them not look for God. It makes them not want to be Christian or believe in Jesus. Jesus was real. I know him personally. He is real. Okay. Stop saying things that make you look like idiots. Okay, it's not flawless. But the most important reason why I'm telling you this, the dark side put Revelations there on purpose to destroy the wonderful gatherings that we had. It turned it into this. Now we don't really learn anything new. We stick to really silly rituals like the Catholics do that make no sense. And they're not even in the Bible, by the way. But most importantly, we don't live in the now, which is what God intended. What do you think he gave us our lives for? Our free will. He gave us free will. And Jesus taught about wisdom and logic and reasoning, and to test all things. How do you test all things? Two ways you can test all things: logic and reason, and the Holy Spirit. Only two ways you can test things. Okay, our lives would be completely different if the book of Revelations didn't exist. If it was never added to the Bible, think about how you would have changed. It would be nothing like you have lived as a Christian. Think about that. If you didn't ever know of anything about Armageddon, heaven and hell, damnation and earth, the end of days, if you didn't know anything about that, your life would be completely different and so much more fulfilling. It has handicapped us. Okay, back to the article. Didn't exist. It was never added to the Bible. Our Bibles would be much better. Just now, it's just how God has intended. But he was proud of creating us with a free will. That was a very proud thing he did. He did that. It was important to him. Our free will was important to him. This whole narrative that he controls everything is not true. He gave us a free will. This whole thing that he knows everything that's going to happen in the future is not, it may be true because time doesn't exist for him, but that's the only reason. He gave us free will, okay? Which means there's more than one reality, by the way. Okay. So it has killed our hunger for a bigger personal relationship with God. It distracts us from that. A lot of people have gone closer to God because of the Bible, and the Holy Spirit has shown them truth in the Bible. It's happened with me. But that doesn't mean it's not also handicapping us in a very deceptive way. Yes, we will recognize truth when we are not completely deluded. because the Holy Spirit will help but guide us to that and say, hey, yeah, this is true. This is true. If something doesn't seem right, test it. And Book of Revelations, hello, warning flags everywhere. There's nothing to make me think that Revelations was put there by God. Not a God of love, no. Maybe the God of the Old Testament. Oh, I went there, didn't I? Okay. Well, although there is a God of the Old Testament, there are many gods in the Old Testament. If you go down to it, it is multiple gods in the Old Testament, and any Bible theologian, whatever, will admit that it's true. Okay, the church has destroyed all those things, and all of them, and most of them were put there by the Book of Revelation. That's in my article. So my article can be found on read.cash. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I used it as a notes for notes because I'm not used to doing videos, and there's a lot of points in this video. So, 15 minutes, 16 minutes. Okay, I didn't do very bad. So let me know what you think. I'm new at this, although I really don't care what people think. I'm trying to inform people, but I do want to know how you think and feel, and I have no problem taking criticism as long as you're honest. Thank you.